Good afternoon, guys. Now, I have discussion C for you. Now, we're discussing something that's going on across the country where um, states are rewriting the rules of nursing home ownership. Okay, so we're going to talk about states privately owning, uh, having, firms um, buy nursing homes and own them, private ownership. So here we go. Here we go with C. Okay. Across the country, states are rewriting the rules of nursing home ownership. And the message is unremarkable. Private equity firms and other financial investors can no longer operate in the shadows of exert influence over resident care without scrutiny, accountability, or consequence. What began as isolated legislative experiments has now become a coordinated national shift driven by bipartisan concern over safety failures, abrupt closures, and the growing complexity of ownership. Structures that obscure who is actually responsible for the well being of frail older adults. The national landscape, a deeper look. States are covering, states are converting, converging on shared set of reforms, but each is layering its own flavor of oversight, enforcement, and transparency. The common trend, the common threads are unremarkable. Ownership transparency, not just listing the operator, but revealing every beneficial owner, shell company, management firm, and real estate affiliate behind the scenes. Pre transaction review, treating nursing home acquisitions more like hospital mergers, with regulators empowered to to pause and to to pause, investigate, or block deals that pose risks. Limits on investor control, drawing bright lines between financial stockholders and clinical decision making, especially around staffing, training, and care quality. Financial safeguards, requiring bonds, reserves or insurance to prevent the chaos of sudden closures when leveraged facilities collapse. This is not incremental tinkering. It is a structural rebalancing of power in a sector where residents live, where a sector where residents' lives depend on stable, well resourced operations. Why 2025 became the the inflection point. The legislative the legislative wave didn't didn't emerge from nowhere. It followed a series of high profile cases, emergency evacuations after private equity blocked facilities, ran out of cash, or failed basic safety inspections. Sale leaseback agreements that saddled homes with unsustainable rent obligations, diverging dollars from diverting dollars from staffing and infection control. Research findings showing higher mortality, lower staffing, and greater instability in some private equity owner owned homes. Regulatory blind spots where states lacked the authority to even identify who controlled a facility until after a crisis unfolded. These failures created a rare bipartisan consensus. Nursing homes are not typical investment vehicles. They are public, and the public invest requires stronger guardrails. State strategies expanded. Examples: states are experimenting with a toolkit that is growing more sophisticated each year. Pre transaction notice and review, 60 to 120-day advance notice, mandatory disclosure of financing terms, and the power to halt deals that jeopardize resident safety. Ownership transparency, public registries of beneficial owners, cross referenced with quality data, enforcement actions, and related party transactions, targeted prohibitions, bans on sale leasebacks without state approval, restrictions on dividended recapitalizations and limits on management fees paid to investor controlled affiliates. Quality linked oversight. Some states now require new owners to demonstrate a track record of safe operations before acquiring additional facilities. Financial sovereignty tests. Stress testing facilities' ability to withstand revenue shocks, staffing shortages, or capital needs. Together, these tools represent a shift from reactive enforcement to proactive risk prevention. What this means for key stockholders. Residents and families gain unprecedented visibility into who owns their facility and what financial pressures may shape care. Transparency becomes a form of protection. Operators and investors face longer timelines, more documentation, and tighter scrutiny over related party transactions. Some may pivot toward passive long-term ownership rather than aggressive financial engineering. Regulators and lawmakers must build new analysis capacity from forensic accounting to quality risk. Modeling to evaluate increasingly complex ownership webs. This is not just regulation, it is a redefinition of what responsible ownership looks like in long-term care. Practical next steps for anyone tackling or advising in this space. Monitor state trackers from policy groups, AG offices, and health law firms to stay ahead of new bills and rule makings. Map beneficial ownership, now including real estate affiliates, management companies, and private equity funds to identify disclosure gaps. Access transaction structures for exposure to new prohibitions and prepare migration strategies such as escrow accounts, governance firewalls, or re, re, revised lease terms, evaluate clinical governance to ensure decision making authority is clearly insulated from investor influence. Guys, when facilities run out of money from states or from private owners, they they close, leaving residents uh, making choices on where they need to relocate. Some people, some residents with that issue may have memory issues, may have disability, may have um, mobility issues going on. So I wish companies that own nursing homes would consider what happens to the clients when the facility closes. What happens to them when they're told, "Oh, sorry, you have to find another place to live, another facility to go to because this one is closing for financial reasons." It's really devastating for residents, and because they have memory issues or mobility issues, they don't understand or they can't move on their own, so they have to make arrangements with family or find a way to get transportation to another facility. Those things before the big uh before someone thinks about closing facility, there are channels you have to go through, especially if you have a facility full of elderly folks with walkers, wheelchairs, or issues about getting around or confusion. Because when you move a person with confusion to another facility, they're confused about where they are. Because they have to allocate, they have to reshift themselves to focus on relearning where things are in the facility. They have to get to know new staff members. That's very scary for someone who is used to being in one facility and having to move. That's the reason why I did this show, to illustrate to people that it does happen, because facilities are sometimes bought from big corporations. Okay, that's all well and good, but the corporation only sees the corporate side. They don't see the resident side of things. They don't see how life really is in the facility. All they're concerned about is buying the facility, and when they lose it, all they're concerned about is telling the resident, "Hey, listen, you have to move." They don't give them options. Sometimes people don't get notices on time. That happens. It causes a lot of chaos for people, families, residents, staff, building operations. That all that has to be considered before someone closes a facility. With that being said, there's your C for the night. I'll be back on with D in a bit. Give me a little bit for a break, please, and I'll be back on with you for D. For now, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.